Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 on Channel 75 and live on the web at CUNY.TV. Tonight we'll check out scenes from an award-winning documentary series about Americans from one town in Arkansas who went off to fight in Iraq. We'll look at scenes like this.
I guess we're pretty much being a pain in their ass. So they have to drive 4 blocks around when all they would have to do is just, drive straight to go to work or go set up some roadside bombs or whatever it is they do.
Also tonight, we'll continue our series showing newsworthy and viral video on the web, including this unlikely star of a webcam hit.
Hey, the big man's back, www.thekidfrombrooklyn.com.
But first, the Overseas Press Club is just what it sounds like. It's the organization of American journalists who cover stories abroad. Their 2006 awards dinner is here in New York this week, and that gives us an opportunity to meet the winners of 2 awards for coverage of the war in Iraq. First up is George Packer, a very influential journalist for The New Yorker. He started out as a supporter of the war and gradually became disillusioned, though interestingly he does not think we should pull out. His widely acclaimed book about the war is called The Assassin's Gate. George, congratulations on your award and welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Now, you did start out as a supporter of the war, but I think you described it in your book as by the slimmest of margins, by the same margin as which Al Gore won the popular vote. Did I get that right?
With similar results, I guess. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. I was a terribly conflicted private citizen. I didn't weigh in public. I didn't write in favor of the war. But as I watched this inevitable build toward war, we were all simply watching history sort of unfurl like a giant wave. I could not find it in myself to oppose a war that was going to get rid of one of the worst regimes in history and create the opportunity for a decent society in a country that deserved it and with which we had been implicated in its suffering for a very long time. We allowed Saddam to stay in power. After the Gulf War, we imposed sanctions that destroyed much of Iraqi society. I thought there had to be a resolution to the Gulf War, and there wasn't one on the horizon other than the one the Bush administration was offering.
So that sounds like you were the classic, what they called liberal hawk.
Yeah, that's become the phrase. It's not a phrase I ever used, but it's been stuck to me probably forever.
Now, we'll get back to your views on the war in a minute and see how they've evolved, but the first part of your book is about the tension within the Bush administration, I think a tension that persists to this day, between the so-called neocons, neoconservatives, and the realists. So how divided was the president's own cabinet on this war before the war?
No, it was so divided that they never really had a final meeting at which the decision to go to war was made. There was never a moment when Colin Powell and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and George Bush sat around a table and made the decision and said, we're doing this, I hope we're all on board. Instead, it happened in sort of the shadows of the White House, with Dick Cheney running end runs around the normal National Security Council, with Donald Rumsfeld accruing all this power in the Pentagon that used to belong to the State Department, and with Colin Powell increasingly marginalized. Richard Haas, who was Colin Powell's chief of policy planning, said to me, you cannot say when the administration decided to go to war. It simply happened. There was a tipping point. The decision was never made.
This, of course, is a week when many former generals are calling for the head of Donald Rumsfeld, and in a minute we'll play a clip of the former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Richard Myers defending him. But on the neocons, Dick Cheney is a fascinating character in your book, because he went from realist before he was vice president, so-called realist, more reserved about the consequences of going into Iraq, to neoconservative hawk. What happened to Dick Cheney?
You know, in a way, he never really became a neocon, but he made a kind of alliance of convenience with them. I don't think Dick Cheney cared about spreading democracy in the Middle East, which really was one of the underpinnings of Paul Wolfowitz's vision of the war. He was really the arch neocon. I think Cheney was a classic Cold War hawk who in the 90s lost his way because there was no more Cold War. And on 9/11, something clicked into place for him. It was as if he had been looking for a cosmic enemy to organize his worldview. And throughout the 90s, there was none. And suddenly, there was one. But he directed his sights on armed states Iraq, etc., rather than on al-Qaeda, because I think his mentality was still back in the Cold War when he saw threats coming from heavily armed enemy states.
Check my memory on something with Dick Cheney. When he was head of Halliburton, before he was in the administration, wasn't he for lifting the sanctions on Iraq and actually doing business with Saddam Hussein's regime?
Not on Iraq, but on Iran. I don't think Cheney ever said to lift the sanctions on Iraq. However, he never said during the 90s we made a mistake leaving Saddam in power. He was not a signer of the famous document, the letter in 1998 that the Project for the New American Century signed saying regime change should become American policy. He was pretty much out of action during the 90s. He was making money in Halliburton. In as far as he was interested in the Middle East, it was as an economic opportunity. And you were almost right that he did think that Iran should be a trading partner for oil companies like his. So he wanted to lift sanctions.
So you do come during a week when former generals, by the half dozen at least, are calling for the head of Donald Rumsfeld. And I want to play a clip of the former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Richard Myers on ABC's This Week on Sunday defending Rumsfeld, and he does it in this clip in a very interesting way. He puts it as a tension between civilian control of the military, which is, of course, a tradition in this country, a principle of this country, and what the generals want. Let's watch.
It's not the military that judges our civilian bosses. That would be we'd be in a horrible state in this country, in my opinion, if the military was left to judge the civilian bosses. Because when you judge Secretary Rumsfeld, you're also judging the commander-in-chief, because that's the chain of command. And I don't, and that's just not appropriate.
Now that's so interesting, and maybe it's worth a minute or two to actually go into the bedrock principle of civilian control of the military.
Yeah,
why do we have that?
Because we don't want military coups, because we're a republic and a democracy, because in the 18th century there was a great fear of militias and of standing armies, because the British had a standing army in this country. But this is an entirely disingenuous argument, because what General Myers is saying is soldiers should just salute and shut up, which is absolutely untrue. Soldiers should give their professional advice to their civilian leaders, and if they disagree with the policy that the civilians make, they have a choice. They can either execute it despite their disagreement or resign. But they have an absolute right and, in fact, a duty to give their professional advice. And I would argue that Donald Rumsfeld has a duty to listen to it. What the retired generals have been saying is Donald Rumsfeld doesn't want to hear any advice that doesn't accord with what he thinks. And from what I've heard from some of those retired generals, you could walk into the tank at the Pentagon, the meeting of the Joint Chiefs, and no one would say a word that he knew would run afoul of the Secretary of Defense. That's not what General Myers is talking about.
In fact, let's play another clip of Myers in which he refers to one of the generals who did that. He was the, what was he, the Army Chief of Staff, General Shinseki.
Yeah.
Before the war, some of you know this, Shinseki warned that the war plan was not going to work, that it was inadequate, that it didn't have enough troops to secure the country after Saddam Hussein fell. Sound prescient. But he was relieved of his command. Let's hear General Myers talking about that.
I'm just saying that General Shinseki was forced to make that comment under pressure, pulled a number out, wasn't wedded to it. Now, there were some mistakes made by, I think, some senior civilian leadership in taking General Shinseki on about that comment. I think that was wrong, and I've expressed those views, matter of fact.
Now, I think by way of a little bit of correction, he wasn't actually relieved of his command.
He was
retired.
essentially retired a little early and ignominiously, and no civilian leader at the Pentagon went to his retirement ceremony, which is a disgrace. But once again, I mean, General Myers was the ultimate pussycat by way of chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He never said a word, apparently in private as well as in public, that was likely to risk the wrath of Donald Rumsfeld. These interviews he's giving remind me of Jill Carroll, the kidnapped journalist, when she was finally released, and she said, "They treated me well, they never laid a hand on me, they let me go to the bathroom whenever I wanted to." She at least had some duress as a justification for saying those things. I don't know what the excuse of someone like General Myers is to continue defending what I think is indefensible.
What about the uniformed military today? Does Rumsfeld have their support?
I think they're divided. I think at senior levels, the higher you get, the more your career, in a sense, is riding on your relationship with the Secretary of Defense. And at very senior levels, you don't hear a whole lot of dissent. Among junior and, say, field-grade officers, especially in Iraq, I hear open disdain for Donald Rumsfeld. It's off the record because it is against the code of conduct. They can't deride someone above them in the chain of command.
They could be court-martialed for speaking out in our democracy against the policy that they're fighting under because they're in the military?
I don't know if court-martial is necessarily the penalty, but they can certainly be sanctioned in some way. And I think that's right, because that is what civilian control of the military is about. The civilians set the policy. They are superior to the men in uniform. That doesn't mean the men in uniform don't have their opinions. And when you're off the record with them, you hear widespread disdain for the way Donald Rumsfeld has conducted the war, and a sense of betrayal, not just from Rumsfeld, but a sense of betrayal toward their senior officers who haven't defended them. And that's why this revolt of the retired generals is interesting. It's getting a lot of underground support from active duty officers.
Interesting. Are you of the opinion that Donald Rumsfeld should resign?
He should have resigned 2 years ago. Abu Ghraib was the moment when he should have resigned. We're having a conversation that we should have had 2 years ago, and I think what's happening right now is Republicans are so nervous about the midterm elections that they're looking for some way to reverse the bad momentum. And Rumsfeld seems the likeliest way. And so the pressure is mounting on the White House from Republicans to get them off the hook by getting rid of Rumsfeld. But George Bush is a stubborn man, and when he's cornered, his reaction is going to be to stand up and say, I'm not going to give in. So I think it may be prolonging Rumsfeld's tenure.
And not only that, but I think General Myers hit something on the head there in that tape, even in the context of defending Rumsfeld, and that is, if Rumsfeld is deemed a failure and resigns, it really means the commander-in-chief is a failure, and it would rub off on George Bush and highly damage the rest of his presidency, not to mention the fate of the 2006 election, don't you think?
Well, the last time we, as Americans, were in this situation, Robert McNamara was eased out of the Pentagon by Lyndon Johnson in favor of Clark Clifford. 2 months later, or maybe 4 months later, Lyndon Johnson himself withdrew from the 1968 presidential race. And I think every senior member of the administration, their legacy is going to be Iraq. And if Rumsfeld goes, it is an admission that their legacy is in deep trouble. It may be that they think they can actually reverse some of the downward slide of the war because Rumsfeld has been a disastrous Secretary of Defense on Iraq. I think it's too late. This is an argument that we should have had 2 years ago. The president should have taken action 2 years ago. But what this shows is, and this has been true since the start of the war, he and his administration care more about winning political fights here, and those are the ones that they really think they have to stand up on, than on what's going on in Iraq and whether Donald Rumsfeld is the right defense secretary for Iraq.
Funny thing is, if this was a parliamentary system like England, the Bush administration might be over. There might be a vote of no confidence that even enough Republicans would sign on to because of the war to turn this president out of office. But of course we're not in that kind of a system, so he's got another 3 years with these kinds of approval ratings and, most crucially, these kinds of disapproval ratings on the war.
And although it's tempting for Democrats to rub their hands in glee, I think it's a disastrous situation. We're in a war. There are threats and dangers and just a global sort of atmosphere of global hostility and downward spiral that 3 years of a lame duck, unpopular president who in a parliamentary system would be retired by now isn't good for any of us.
In The New Yorker a few weeks ago, one of your pieces, you described the difference between Vietnam and Iraq this way. In Vietnam, President Johnson claimed he was getting out when he was really going in. President Bush claims he is staying in when he is really getting out. Is President Bush really getting us out of Iraq?
I think we have seen a policy all along of just enough to fail. In other words, rather than make the difficult choices about troop levels, spending, and simply political risks that might have turned around the situation, the president has committed just enough of his own capital and of the country's blood and treasure to fail in Iraq. I think what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months is we'll see a very quiet, slow pulling back of Americans from the cities and perhaps even from the country to the surrounding countries. I expect by the end of this year we'll be down below 100,000 troops. I might be wrong. They've had plans to pull out before and they've reversed them when things got bad, but I think right now Iraq is in a kind of irrevocable downward spiral. There will be no major events in the next few months that can turn it around in the eyes of the American people. I think that has to be the White House's biggest worry.
But you, even as a major critic now of the war in Iraq and someone who started out as a liberal hawk in support, you don't support pulling out of Iraq, do you?
It's a really hard question, Brian. I look at it and say if we stay, we will lose more Americans. We will pour more money and effort and energy down this effort without any guarantee that a good outcome will result, perhaps only avoiding a disastrous outcome. If we leave, I'm fairly certain, and I hear this from Iraqis of all backgrounds, the level of violence will explode. The country will fragment even more than now into kind of barricaded enclaves, and the neighboring countries, who are not particularly friendly neighbors, are going to start picking Iraq apart like a carcass. That's going to be a security problem as well as, I would argue, a moral calamity for us for years to come. I cannot look at withdrawal as any kind of solution. I may come to the point where I have to admit that we can't do any more good in Iraq, but I'm not there yet.
So you would send in another 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 to pacify the situation?
It's much too late for that for a couple of reasons. One, the troops are not there. The American public would never stand for it. And the other reason is in Iraq, simply throwing more troops who don't have a real strategy and real preparation and an ability to affect the kind of counterinsurgency that I wrote about in the New Yorker, where it was successful in one town. I just don't think a lot of raw recruits being thrown into Iraq are going to get anything done. In fact, what they'll do is simply create more unhappiness among Iraqis and more strife and more killing. The time for more troops was before we went in and for about a year and a half after we went in. But it's now the dynamic has gone in the other direction.
So the President's defense secretary is not about to resign, apparently. The President's press secretary, Scott McClellan, did resign today. Is that just shooting the messenger?
Yeah, my guess is Scott McClellan has had enough. Can you imagine his job? He has to get up and essentially defend all of this, really defending what can't be defended, and to do it with a straight face and in the face of increasingly hostile questions. I think the guy's just tired and wants to get out. I think that the real, even more than Rumsfeld, if Cheney were to say that his health has forced him to retire, and a new vice president, John McCain or
Condoleezza Rice, everybody says.
These are fantasies, because this is an administration that all along has shown when its back is against the wall, it fights. It does not give in. They regard giving in as weakness, and if you do it, your enemies are simply going to circle around and tear you to pieces. So and this is their problem. They don't know how to get themselves out of the hole that they're in.
We just have a minute left. Iran and Iraq fought a bitter, bloody, million-death, as I gather, war through the 1980s.
Yeah.
But now, the most powerful bloc in Iraq, Muqtada Sadr Shiites, is aligned to some degree with Iran, at the same time that we have all this tension with Iran over their nuclear program. Are we headed, ironically, toward an Iran-Iraq axis as the result of this war that was supposed to keep America safe from the axis of evil?
Something like that is happening. Shiite domination of Baghdad and the south is pretty complete now, except for the Sunni enclaves of Baghdad. Those are dividing up so that Baghdad is becoming an ethnically cleansed city. And what's happening is...
But does Shiite domination mean Iranian domination?
Right now it does, because both Muqtada al-Sadr on one side and the Badr organization, which is the other main Shiite power, probably more powerful in terms of organization and weaponry than Muqtada al-Sadr, they're both essentially beholden to Tehran, to different factions in Tehran. Iran, I think, is playing a dangerous game. They see Iraq as a place where they can simply extend their influence, but the Sunnis in Iraq see all Shia now as Iranians, and there is the possibility of an enormous Sunni-Shiite conflagration that's going to pull in the other Sunni countries in the region, and that can't be what Iran wants.
George Packer's book is The Assassin's Gate. You can continue to read his fabulous reporting on Iraq in The New Yorker, and congratulations on your Overseas Press Club Award. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Brian.
Up next, another winner of an Overseas Press Club Award for coverage of Iraq. It's a 10-part documentary series about soldiers from one American town who were sent off to fight. We'll meet one of the producers and show you some very compelling highlights. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Howdy, partners. Buckaroo Barry Mitchell inviting you to join us every Saturday morning at 9, beginning April 8th, for Hopalong Cassidy Theater, digitally remastered episodes of America's first TV superstar. A full hour of retro Western fun. Hopalong Cassidy Theater, Saturday mornings at 9, beginning April 8th on CUNY TV Channel 75. That is, if I can still get bulbs for this projector. Saturdays at 9, beginning April 8th on CUNY TV, Channel 75.
Once you see the world through math and science, you'll never see anything the same way again. Go to girlsgotech.org.
You'll see.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, we believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 on Channel 75 and live on the web at CUNY.tv. Now, we just spoke to George Packer from The New Yorker, who won an Overseas Press Club Award for his print reporting on Iraq. Now we'll meet one half of the producing team, and they are brothers, who won for the 10-part documentary series that follows a National Guard unit from Arkansas that was deployed to Iraq, much to their surprise. The series Off to War, maybe you've seen some of it, airs on the Discovery Times channel. Here's a sample clip.
This is El Shab. It's right next door to Sadr City, and all of our intelligence says that Shab is the next insurgent hotspot, if you will, and it's a very poor area. We're setting up a traffic control point to be able to check all traffic coming in and out of this district, so that we're kind of thwarting car bombers and other insurgent forces.
Well, very powerful and very personal. We will show some more clips from this 10-part documentary series as we go. Now we meet one of the producers of Off to War, Brent Renaud. Thank you so much for coming in.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, and congratulations on your Overseas Press Club Award. Well deserved.
Yeah,
you did this with your brother on this Arkansas National Guard unit. You're from Arkansas, right?
Yeah, we're both from Arkansas. As you can imagine, the National Guard is a big deal there. I mean, growing up, it's normal that your friends' fathers or your uncles are going off one weekend a month and doing something in the woods with the National Guard. And when we found out that these guys were going to get deployed 3,000 people from Arkansas to Iraq, we knew it was something we wanted to be a part of.
So these are troops that you knew, people you knew personally, some of them?
This particular unit was a small town about an hour north of where I grew up, so I didn't know most of these guys. But certainly in the Arkansas National Guard, over there in Iraq, there were guys, friends from high schools, friends of my brothers, and so we knew a lot of people over there.
How objective can you be covering people you know, or isn't that even a relevant question?
Well, maybe it's not relevant for this particular film, because what we do is we try to make a film from their point of view completely. There's no narration in our films. There's no music even. Everything comes from their mouths or from the family's mouths, and so that was our goal, to tell the story of this deployment from the soldiers and also from the families who were left behind.
Let's watch another clip from the film. Here you're going to see Iraqi children getting on the nerves of one soldier, and a kind of frightening description of the tortured relationship between some of the troops and even the children in Iraq. Let's watch.
Assalamu alaikum.
What's your name?
Mulazam? Mason.
Mason?
Mason.
Hey, if you touch the Humvee again, I will break your finger. It's an imaginary line right there. And I know they don't mean any harm or anything, but they just get on my damn nerves. I mean, it's like a daycare around this mother. Hey, back up a little bit.
Hey, go! As long as they stay on their side, we're good. I don't like being mixed in with them. You don't know who to trust.
These are kids, man. But you want to live your life being considered an evil person?
This is just a temporary thing. When I get back home, I don't have no worries about what the hell they think.
Well, I hope you don't carry, this back home. That's one of the biggest fears I had, is you kids losing your sense of humanity. You need to chill.
You never know, that kid may have a 40mm grenade in his underwear. And bam, no more Lieutenant Mason.
Imagine having to live like that. Brent Renaud, give us the context of that.
Yeah, this is late in the deployment, after about 30 guys from the Arkansas National Guard have lost their lives. And you see that wearing on some of the younger guys like Matt Hurtline, the soldier right here in this particular scene. By this time, they became really weary. They have become quite a bit disillusioned in a lot of things that they were doing. They were told that this was going to be a peace and stability mission, and as an engineer unit, they'd be building schools. They would be heroes for the Iraqi people. They'd be building roads. Right from the beginning, it turned into something completely different. And by this time, after, they say over there, how they feel about how things are going has a lot to do with how long has it been since someone has died. And in this particular scene, his best friend had recently died while they were setting up for the election, shot by a sniper from the roof. The conversations he's having with the lieutenant, it's a sort of a theme throughout the film. The lieutenant's very much pro-military, very much pro the administration, and Matt Hurtline, a younger guy, much more disillusioned. And this sort of back and forth with these two guys throughout the series is something we focused on.
Do you think there's, in general, a generational split on attitudes to the war among the fighters?
I think there is somewhat, particularly a lot of these younger guys, they join because they need a little money. The farming and the manufacturing in small towns like where these guys are from in Clarksville, Arkansas, isn't what it used to be. They say that, we joined to play cards and drink on the weekends with our friends, and this is just really not what we were expecting. But near the beginning, everyone sort of had a bit of a positive attitude, but once they got over there and things turned really bad, these guys convoyed in the same week that the contractors were hung from the bridge in Fallujah. Things really changed so quickly, and their mission changed so quickly that you see the effects on the young guys.
A premise of this series, and you just alluded to it, is that these were guys who basically joined their state National Guard and had no idea that they might wind up being sent off to war half a world away.
Yeah.
Talk about the context of the lives of most of these particular soldiers and what they did expect.
Yeah, these guys are ministers and teachers and policemen. In the case of this young guy we just saw, he's just a kid right out of high school. Joined for an extra paycheck on the weekend when he can pick up jobs. He works at the fast food restaurants, maybe a Walmart distribution plant. It's a little bit extra money on the weekend. Their training was mostly as engineers because they have that kind of experience working in fields and working with plows and this sort of thing. So that's what they thought they were going to be doing. I think that a kid like this will never again join the National Guard expecting that. I think you pretty much now know that you're going somewhere at some point.
Although I've spoken to soldiers, mostly full-time enlisted to be sure, but there's not always that much sympathy for those who are in the National Guard, as if they had no idea that there was the possibility that they would be sent to fight for their country. They're told when they sign up, aren't they?
Well, they're told that, well, you know how the recruiters often say, you know, of course this is a possibility, this is in the small print, but it hasn't happened since the Korean War. We haven't had this kind of deployment of National Guard people to a combat zone since the Korean War. These guys' fathers, some of their grandfathers were in the National Guard and had never left the state. So, yes, of course it was a possibility, and they always knew that, and they couldn't necessarily argue against it. But to say it didn't catch them by surprise, this is not true.
So, in that context, let's watch another clip from the film, and this is one soldier's call home on Christmas.
I keep hearing on the news and stuff like so-and-so's been killed, and I keep thinking, oh goodness, that might be Matt, and I just worry that he's going to be the next one.
Hello?
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas to you.
Is there snow on the ground? Tell me that.
Yeah, we have a white Christmas.
Figures. You got Dee-Daw there?
Yeah, Dee-Daw's here.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Dee-Daw.
He said, Merry Christmas, Dee-Daw. Did you go to church?
No.
Well, you need to go sometime when you know they're having it.
Yeah, I know. I'm probably going to hell.
No, but you probably need to go to church. Did you like your stocking?
Yes, thank you for everything.
When did you open it?
Al, I cheated and opened yours last night.
How did I know you would have to cheat and look or peek? You always do that. You used to get up in the middle of the night and look. You haven't changed a bit.
Now, I hope you guys had a good Christmas. Tell everybody I said bye and Merry Christmas. Love them all.
I love you.
I love you too.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye, Mama.
Bye.
I don't think there's been one single time since I got here that she hasn't cried while we were on the phone.
It's just hard not having here.
How did you do that?
Well, the way we did this entire project was my brother, one of us would be in Arkansas at all times and one of us was in Iraq at all times, and we switched places every 3 months. The idea was to be on both sides of everything that happened here. So if maybe one of the soldiers was going out on a mission that day, but his wife was dealing something on the farm, to show both ends on that. One particular space, we had a turkey farmer. His wife was left with a 64,000 bird turkey farm that she had to run on her own, and she didn't know anything about turkey farming. She quit her job and she was running that. So we were showing their stories at the same time. In this case, it's a holiday. In another case, it's an argument about divorce over the phone. In another case, it's how were the families dealing with the Abu Ghraib scandal at home, and how were the soldiers dealing with it there. So the point was, in real time, to be on both sides of this story all the time.
Did you make this documentary to make a statement about the war?
We didn't at all. What we set out to make a film about some guys from our state going for a peace and stability mission, like I said. Basically was going to be sort of, we thought would be a feel-good project. That's what we were going to film. It changed completely.
Because you were there at the beginning when Mission Accomplished was declared back in May of 2003. You thought it was going to be hearts and flowers and garlands and just settling out the country.
And that's what they trained for. There was very little training on these things about how to deal with IEDs and combat situations and all the things that they got in right away. They were guarding prisoners. They were taking prisoners. They were actually fighting insurgents in the streets. These things that they train for now, these guys weren't training for at the time.
You have a website and a discussion guide that goes with this series. And the discussion guide says the point is to understand the experience of individuals going off to war as individuals, not representatives of any political or cultural viewpoints. Why did you include that?
Well, for us, because it wasn't a political story. I mean, I would say that most of the guys, we never asked them. I would say most of these guys, 65% support the administration, would consider themselves Republican. But it wasn't an issue. It wasn't about what we were doing. We were trying to tell the story, a National Guard story, or, you know, like a reserve, part-time soldiers. What's it like when all of a sudden we break sort of sort of the unwritten agreement that we've had for a long time, that these guys are National Guard. They're not International Guard. They're to protect us at home. They're to take care of floods. They're to do these sorts of things on the home front, and that's what they sign up for. How does it affect families? How does it affect a town? And how does it affect the soldiers when we sort of change this and we make these everyday people like you and me into active military soldiers?
So we just had a guest here, another Overseas Press Club Award winner, George Packer from The New Yorker, who said they can't say so on the record, but more of the rank-and-file troops in Iraq, as well as those who are stateside, also think Donald Rumsfeld has bungled this war awfully and should resign, and they're mad as hell at him in addition to anyone else. Is that your experience with this unit?
Well, with this, we left in April 2005, so we've been gone for a while now. Certainly during the Abu Ghraib scandal, there was talk about that. But when we first went in was 1 year before the situation with Donald Rumsfeld and the Tennessee National Guard and the lack of armor, and that was all over the networks that the guy confronted him in the press conference. We went in a year before that without any armor at all. So these guys were already thinking, this was already on their mind. And so there's definitely a lot of that.
Do you think this war experience has made Democrats out of a lot of these Republicans?
I don't think it's made Democrats out of these guys, but it certainly made them think about the world and think about politics a lot more than they did in the past. A lot of these guys have told me, you know, I never voted, I never thought about these things before, but this has really engaged me in a way that we didn't think about before.
Let's look at another clip from Off to War, this time one soldier's experience upon coming home.
Do you know what this is? What is it?
Iraqi money.
Iraqi money. After Daddy went and got the bad guy?
This is my brother Gary. He served in Iraq. He helps me with questions that I have while we're out on Tommy or gone.
This is the one that held down the fort while I was gone.
Anybody that expect them to come back and be exactly the way they were when they left, they have a rude awakening.
I know when I got back, she didn't want to ride with me because I was watching for everything on the side of the road, expecting everything to blow up.
His temper's a lot quicker. He doesn't process things like he did before he left. It's a lot different.
Ronald called me and apologized for being not talking a whole lot and to being preoccupied and stuff like that.
They've looked death in the face, so you can't do that without changing. It changes your whole perspective.
Could have been a soldier after Vietnam, that's for sure.
Yeah, certainly could have been. You know, these guys are all affected in different ways. You know, it depends a lot of times how close were you to the bodies, how close were you when something, you know, happened, something big deal. They all deal with it in different ways. This particular guy is having a lot of trouble with nightmares and sleeping, a lot of the old things you hear about PTSD.
And do you think that the experience of the war and the context of the war have a lot to do with each other? You know, maybe they were just all swept under the rug after World War II, but you didn't hear those kinds of stories after World War II. You heard them all the time after Vietnam. And now we're hearing them again as people come home from Iraq and have the experience of being jumpy at every little thing like that guy.
Right. I suspect it was there. I mean, I think it was maybe part of the culture. You didn't talk about these things. Maybe it was a more macho culture back then. I don't know. Maybe it had to do with less media coverage to bring to these sorts of issues. But these guys, when they're in a situation where they're talking with the Vietnam vets, they seem to have a lot in common.
And one of the questions that you ask in your discussion guide is whether the characters in this documentary series seem remote to you, the viewer. Why do you ask that?
Well, to me, the point for me for this film is because these are just like us. I can imagine myself in this situation. Matt Hurtline's mom reminds me exactly of my mom, the woman who was on the phone there. To me, this is my neighbors, you know, my family, and to me, it makes you really think about this war from like putting yourself into there. What if I was over there? How would I feel about it? What if I was the one who was fighting? Would I think about things differently, or if it was my kid? So we sort of hope that people can relate to these people on a personal level to where they can actually feel what it would be like for them.
And let's look at another clip from the documentary. This is one soldier's conversation with an Iraqi about democracy and voting.
So we can get out when we want?
Yeah, you can get out right through here.
Okay.
Not there, not down there.
And this will be the center of the election?
One of them.
One of them?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you going to vote?
No.
Oh, please. I feel like my work here is meant for nothing if no one comes to vote.
Can you guarantee my security if I go to the elections?
All you have to do is walk across the street.
You know, before the American invasion, there was no terrorist in Iraq. But when you came, you throw all the army in the street, you let the frontiers of Iraq without any soldier.
Many mistakes we
In the streets,
I agree.
there were people who sell army weapons. Now you are asking yourself, how come that the insurgents have so many weapons? You let them have it.
We know. We've made some mistakes. I agree.
They are not mistakes. They are sins. And now you are the targets of these weapons.
They're not mistakes, they are sins, that Iraqi said.
Yeah. Yeah, he was caught a little bit off guard at that. This is Lieutenant Mason, who was always really trying to pump everybody up about this mission. One thing that's unique about these guys as National Guardsmen, as just citizens with average jobs, is they didn't have the identity necessarily of killers, of we're going to just go out and kick butt. They really liked to talk to people. This happened every day. They would get out into the streets and talk to people and try to understand where they were coming from. Lieutenant Mason, in this case, wasn't expecting that. He's very pro, I guess, this war, pro the administration, and he thought that he would approach this guy and he'd be happy about the elections, and obviously he wasn't.
Instead, he was all skeptical, and even he, Lieutenant Mason, admitted that they made a lot of mistakes. That was interesting.
Yeah. This is near the end, and that is something that unfolds throughout the series. He definitely wouldn't have been admitting that in episode 3 or 4.
Yeah, but something else that he said struck me too, which was that it would deny him of the I don't remember the exact words, but what we came here for was so that you could vote.
Yeah,
and it strikes me that the official rationale from the administration for the war has changed so many times.
Yeah.
It was WMDs. Then it was liberating Iraq. Then it was, we're fighting al-Qaeda there, so we don't have to fight them here.
Right.
Does that rub off on the troops?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this was at election time, and at election time it was about bringing democracy to the country and helping them have a democratic country, and that's what he was definitely talking about.
Do they feel, though, that they have a clear sense of their mission, or do they hear the news like we hear the news and think, why are they telling us we're here now?
This particular unit I was with, they did not feel like they had a clear mission. They said basically what we do is we ride around as targets and wait to get shot at. The biggest problem that they felt that they didn't have enough local intelligence to determine where the insurgents were so that they could go and get them. Instead, what they did is they drove around and waited for a roadside bomb to blow them up. This election was actually the one time that they felt like they had a focus. Even the most cynical guys throughout the entire thing, on this particular time during the election, felt like they had done something, because we were filming when the mortars were coming down on us. We were mortared about 50, 60 times the morning before the elections, and still people came out to vote even as the mortars were following, and they thanked the soldiers, and that was the one day that they had that kind of reception.
Last thing, and we have a minute left, also from your discussion guide, one of the questions is, does this documentary seem biased, and why or why not? I wonder what kinds of responses you've gotten from viewers around the country.
Well, I think that particular question was written by the Discovery Channel, because I think they're curious to see how people are perceiving this. Certainly we don't feel like it's biased at all. We feel like it's the words of the soldiers and the families, the people who fought this war, and the people who have had to deal with it most directly. And that's what we hope that other people take out of it.
Well, it was good enough to win an Overseas Press Club Award. Congratulations on that. We're glad you're here in New York from Arkansas for that this week.
Thank you.
And well-deserved from what I've seen of the series. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it.
Well, up next, we will continue our series with newsworthy and viral video from the web. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
prominent professors, outstanding students, illustrious alumni, all on the Emmy-nominated magazine show about CUNY. Hi, I'm Dwayne Ferguson. Join us this Sunday when we'll bring you the stories about people and programs that make CUNY a place where you study with the best.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 on Channel 75 and live on the web at CUNY.TV. And now with the world of Internet video continuing to explode, we continue our series that surveys newsworthy and viral video on the web. With us as our viewing partner tonight is John Fine, media columnist for Business Week. And let's play our first clip. This is one of the unnamed brother of a Chinese user of the Yahoo mail service who was sent to prison when Yahoo turned over information to the Chinese government. This was part of a video brought to Yahoo executives last week by an advocacy group, and the person in this video addresses those executives directly. Let's watch. I'll translate. He's saying, hello, I'm Li Ji's brother. My brother is in jail because of you. His health was not great before he was imprisoned. He had hepatitis. Since he's been in jail, he's caught pleurisy because of doing hard labor. Now his health is real bad. We were really a close-knit family, living in peace. This has just torn our family apart. He's been found guilty under Chinese law, although when you look at his file, I'm convinced he's innocent. Your company is the reason that all of this has happened. I hope that in the future you'll respect the law and listen to your conscience. Now, of course, I don't speak Chinese, but I was reading the translation because we knew it was a little bit hard to see on the screen there. So, John Fine, give us the background, give us the context of that clip. Did Yahoo really send this guy's brother to jail in China?
The context behind that clip is that commerce often doesn't have much of a conscience, and a lot of the big internet companies, which we all associate with being cool and open and democratic, now they're big companies. They want to do business with China. If you want to do business with China, as other media players like Rupert Murdoch have discovered, you got to play ball. You have to follow their laws, which are quite different from the ones we have here. Yahoo's in a situation where they're accused here of turning over mail that essentially imprisons someone in China. Google is run into similar situations where they're restricting some of their search, which leads to people like Bill Gates of Microsoft saying, like, well, I thought the motto here was do no evil. I guess now it's do less evil or don't do as much evil. But what's happening now is that with the virality of the web and with the portability of video and a kind of, anyone can tape this now, we can see extraordinarily things like this. Not only can these things be recorded, they can be transmitted, they can be sent around, even from repressive regimes like China. I don't think this changes the way that Yahoo does business. This certainly doesn't take down China, but it shows that openness and, a closed society is somewhat different than it was if a country wants to play in the world as we know it.
Doesn't that man risk being imprisoned himself for making this video and sending it around the world on the web?
Absolutely he does. Absolutely, no question about that. But, consider his situation. He feels that he has to make a plea to Yahoo to do something. I don't know what Yahoo can do. But, the thing with the web is that you see more and more extraordinary artifacts like this. Ordinary people in extraordinary situations. 25 years ago, we might have been lucky to read about this guy. Now we can see him, and we can see him whenever.
And what can Yahoo do? Apparently this tape, besides being uploaded on the web, and it has become viral, so it's being forwarded around a lot, it's also being delivered, I think, by hand to Yahoo by an advocacy group called Reporters Without Borders. What do they want Yahoo to actually do?
I guess they want Yahoo to reconsider their policy. I would think they want Yahoo to reconsider how they engage with China. I hate to sound cynical about this, but I just have a hard time believing that that appeal is going to have much weight. The people who run Yahoo are not, frivolous people. They know that they're kind of dancing with the devil. if they're going to be doing business with China. This is a very graphic representation of it, as it should be. But I wish I could say I'm less cynical about this having an effect.
Well, the president of China, Hu Jintao, is meeting with President Bush in the United States this very week. Do you think there's any possibility that the case of this guy's brother might be brought up?
It could conceivably be brought up, but I wonder to what end. Everyone wants to play ball with China. There were pictures on the web today of people like Bill Gates, like toasting him with champagne. I somehow don't know that after they quaff the champagne, if Bill Gates is going to go, by the way, about this guy on Yahoo, I just don't see that happening.
So wait, Hu Jintao is meeting with Bill Gates?
There's a picture on the web today of a bunch of tech people, including Bill Gates, toasting Hu Jintao.
So that happened this morning, and you were just quoting Gates being cynical or skeptical about this whole Yahoo and Google situation, saying the motto was do no evil, now it's do less evil. What do you think Bill Gates would have said to Hu Jintao?
Probably nothing, actually, if anything at all. Everybody wants to do business with China, and everyone has had to cut deals to do that. Rupert Murdoch's probably a bad example because we associate him with a different politic than a tech zillionaire. But he had no problems, ensuring that things were censored, that things didn't appear, that certain books just kind of didn't happen. That stuff didn't turn on, that stuff didn't go on the satellite. There's a long history of this, unfortunately.
I hear Bill Gates is like a rock star in China.
Well, he's a rock star here, too.
That's true. He's a rock star everywhere, even in China.
Even in China.
But it's an interesting question, the do less evil question. Because one could argue, as I guess Yahoo and Google do, just like the U.S. government argues, constructive engagement, that they're going to facilitate more freedom by having the search engines, even in their restricted forms, than by just not being there at all and making it less easy to navigate the web for any Chinese.
That's absolutely true. There's a story in the upcoming New York Times Sunday magazine, which will come out this Sunday, that's basically about how Google, even if it's kind of bastardized form in China, there's an argument that will have some effect. I actually believe that. I don't have a problem believing that. The problem is that, there's a human cost to doing that. We're seeing with this video what that is.
Let's look at our next clip. We always endeavor to bring you what we think is newsworthy, but we also show you the more viral video on the web. This next one took viral to another level. I'll tell you what to expect before we play it, but this might sound a little confusing, so bear with me. This is of a user of the video website YouTube watching a video of someone watching a YouTube video of someone else watching a YouTube video of that first girl. Told you you'd be confused. Let's watch.
Okay, I've decided to watch Norna, who's watching me, who's watching Apartment 79, who's watching Jess, who's watching James, who's watching Norna, who's watching Chicken Little. And I love this video because I love her laugh. It makes me laugh. Okay, Laughing at Pitzel is the name of the video.
Okay, this was the first time I saw this video. What's her name? Pixel 2? Where she said at the end, oh, I'm so obsessed. Hey, maybe everyone has OCD too.
Hold on, I like this part. She goes, uh-oh.
Maybe OCD has become contagious. Uh-oh. Maybe we all need to go into therapy.
Maybe so. I like this video because it kind of feels like everything's come full circle. I watch a bunch of other people who are watching Norna, and then Norna comes back around and watches me. I feel like my chi I feel complete, I've got good chi, and I feel like...
All right, good chi. We don't have much time, and I want to get to one more clip. So just real quick on this. I mean, it's just silliness. Why does this kind of feedback loop catch on the way it does?
There's something just weirdly compelling about it. It's actually at the point, there are tons of sharing websites like YouTube, like you mentioned, like MySpace.com, which has, I think, 60 million plus users at this point. And there's something just weirdly compelling about putting a picture up, having your friends comment on it, then you comment on your friends, and it becomes this... It's completely incomprehensible to outsiders. I mean, it becomes an inside joke on an inside joke. But it's just weirdly compelling.
All right, let's watch a clip of someone else who's become a kind of celebrity in the web video world. This is someone who calls himself the Kid from Brooklyn.
Hey, the big man's back. www.thekidfrombrooklyn.com. You know, the big man got up this morning. You know, I felt like having a hot cup of coffee and a piece of pound cake, you know. Over here in New Jersey, I wound up in one of them Starbucks, you know. I knew the joint wasn't right as soon as I walked in, you know. I seen people sitting on couches, lounge chairs, whatever they drinking. They look like ice cream sodas, you know, with mounds of whipped cream and all kinds of shit on top.
All right, and on he goes about Starbucks. You're laughing. You can show your face. You like this video.
This is, to me, this is true entertainment. You have a guy who calls himself the Kid from Brooklyn.com. He's a ticket broker in New Jersey, and about a year and a half ago, he taped himself ranting about Starbucks. And it's just hilarious. It's a guy in a very bad cut-off sweatshirt, like screaming about, you know, a chocolate lotto and bleep this and bleep that.
And not your typical webcam user who would be maybe 50 years younger than him.
Exactly. But, you know, I mean, you know, the web works for everybody. What can I say? I mean, you don't have to be young and cute like maybe the people on the last one. And, you know, this kind of stuff, it takes one person to see it and forward it. And, you know, the next thing you know, 1 million people can be seeing it.
So he's like Andy Rooney on drugs.
Andy Rooney himself might be Andy Rooney on drugs, but I mean, sure, he's Andy Rooney on drugs.
The drug, of course, being all the caffeine and the Starbucks lotto. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Brian.
And that's it for tonight's show. We're here Wednesday nights at 7:30. Don't forget to tune into my daily radio show as well, weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC, New York Public Radio. Tomorrow, a guest host, Srinath Srinivasan. Have a great night.